Good morning, YouTube world. It still is morning. It's 11 o'clock, but it's still morning, and I just finished my morning cup of tea. Don't have coffee because I make cold brew and I haven't been making it, but I'd rather have the hot tea anyway, and it's nummy. I had the sweetest dream. It was kind of a funny dream, though. I show up at a campsite. Now, in the dream, I was in my parents' camper, and they were with me, but you know, by the time the dream morphed, I was in my bus. And it wasn't really an important part of the dream. But I go to town to use, because I hear there's a swimming pool in town, and I want to go swimming. So I go to town, and the swimming pool is at the elementary school, which is in an old converted barn. And so I want to go swimming. They don't have change rooms, and then I realize I have to pee, so where's the bathroom? They don't really have bathrooms. What they have is two closets downstairs in the basement by the caretaker's office, which are piled up in front of with a bunch of junk. When you move all the junk and you open the closets, the one marked boys has a blue porta potty, and the one marked girls has a pink porta potty, and they're just stored on a shelf. You have to bring them down and set them in the hallway and pee in front of the caretaker and anybody who comes downstairs. Like, no privacy. So when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I think I'll just skip this. So I leave the school, and I start wandering around this little town, and the first thing I notice is not only can they not afford toilets for their school kids, but there's no sidewalks in town. Not one sidewalk. That was really strange. I'm walking on people's lawns. And at one point, the shade is as dark as night. It was almost like a moonlit night at times, and other times it was like sunlight. You know how dreams can have issues with continuity. And so I'm laying on the grass for a moment, just kind of like across from a park, and I notice that there's a great number of kids on bikes in the park. And all of a sudden, whooping and hollering and crowding up, they come riding up, and I get the sense that they want to frighten me. And I refuse to be frightened. I just lay there and smile and wave at them, and sure enough, they just want to act tough. They're not actually malicious. So they all bike off, and then I walk a little farther, and I pass this one property where they had all kind. It was like a zoo, and there was this little brown bunny on the driveway, and a couple of parrots, and then they pointed at me, and I see you have parrots too. And it turns out, although I couldn't feel them or see them, I have my African gray Sam on my shoulder and some unknown cockatoo on the other one. And I don't know. I never did see them in the dream, but people again pointed them out a little bit further down the street as I continued to walk. And then this young man in a hot rod drives up, offers me a ride back to my campsite. So he looks like a young Brad Pitt, and I'm like, okay, sure, no problem. And we get to the campsite, and he's like, you're really cool, and I really like you, and I know you're old and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I'm old enough to be your grandmother. He says, but you can kiss me if you want. And I'm like, what's a little kiss? I haven't tasted it, young mouth. So I kiss him, and then he stops right in the middle, and it's like, no, that's too weird for me. I'm like, yeah, I know. I've been in your position. Because actually I have. I've kissed someone who was just a little too old, and there's a point at which it just doesn't work. It was only a kiss. It's all it was ever going to be. And so I head back to my bus. But just as I get out of his car, I see a rabbit on the ground in front of his car. And it's not just any rabbit. It's the rabbit that I miss the most. Lucky Rabbit. He was such an awesome personality. And there he is, sitting on the ground waiting for me, and I pick him up and I walk in, and just sort of nonsense goes on with for a while. It's just the dream trying to keep itself going. But sooner or later, when you have to pee in a dream, you actually have to pee. So eventually it wakes you up and you get up. But it was a very sweet dream to have in the morning. So today is my birthday, which is to say that it's the anniversary of the day on which I was born. I'm 54. And my whole life, my birthday's been cluttered with poppies and morbid sentiments. I mean, when I was a child, they forced me to sit would be solemn for a minute, full minute at 11 o'clock every morning on my birthday. 11, 11, 11. In fact, that was when I started this video. I was, you know, and we'd be trucked off into an auditorium where we'd watch images of dead people and soldiers and war and violence and death and starving and skinny and there'd be, you know, victims of the concentration camps, and it left in me a sense of guilt. How dare I want to have a happy birthday on a day when everybody's mourning? You know, remember our fallen soldiers, and oh, Billy died in the war, and in Flanders fields the poppies lay, and in row upon row, or I don't even remember I don't want to know the whole poem. I've resented it, and at the same time I felt like I'm not worthy. It's added to my sense of guilt and unworthiness at being here. You know, how dare you show up in the world on that day of all days? It's like, yeah, well, you know, nobody gave me a calendar while I was in the womb. I could have, like, held off a day. And to this day, I wake up on my birthday and social media is flooded with the poppies and the thing and the war. And I mean, when I was 5 years old, I already had the sense that I was a pacifist. I was already trying to argue that there is nothing, no matter how egregious, which is an excuse for violence. And, you know, I had the whole, what if your whole family is getting harmed in front of your eyes? You know, do you stand there and do nothing? It's like, I couldn't answer that question then. I can now. You don't stand there and do nothing. In the first place, if you're truly dedicated to peace, violence walks around you. I've seen it happen time and time again. I've been in situations where everybody around me insists it should have gone to violence, and by some miracle, it never did. I've been in places where fights are supposed to break out and they don't. I've walked in places where I shouldn't and it didn't get violent. It's almost like there's a magic aura around me that pacifies the room because it's a contract that I have with Spirit. I do not do violence, so Spirit does not visit me with violence. I've guessed in a previous life, I figured that out. I had that experience and I understood that violence never fixes it. Consequently, I have chosen not to even study Tai Chi, let alone Judo or Jiu-Jitsu or self-defense, because it's an art of war. I know, and then I got a sword painted on my back. I'm still processing that. But I do understand that the katana in Japan, especially these days, rarely tastes blood and very often was an instrument of peace. It was used to prevent bad people. It was like a cop. So, like I said, I'm still processing that, how it relates that a pacifist should wear a sword on her back. I should have said no to the idea, but the idea came up like a geas on my spirit. A geas? You know, I've only ever read that word, Geas. I've never heard it pronounced. I think it's geas. And I've never... I never questioned it. It was like, I am a sword. I need to get a sword painted on me to remind me, to remember, and to show the world that I am a sword. And it's as much to do with the way the sword is forged and the strength in the sword as it has with the sword as weapon. And certainly you wouldn't consider it a weapon if it was a kitchen cutting knife, and maybe it's like that. Maybe it's, I don't know. In pagan parlance, a sword is the sharpness of mind, it's clarity, it's cutting away confusion, lies, and uncertainty. It is cutting to the heart of the matter. It is all about knowledge and mind and strength. I should sit up straight if I'm going to talk about strength. So, yeah, I've always felt that if you truly refuse to be violent, you will figure out another way. And I still think that's true. And I can look back at the various reasons that army has been deployed in my lifetime, and World War II was the last time that an army was deployed in a manner that everyone would more or less say, yeah, that was righteous. Because Hitler and his guys were being nasty, 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 and the only way to stop them was to go to war. Maybe. Sometimes I wonder if that, I mean, that's the story we've been told, and that was the experience on the ground, but I've learned since then that there's a lot of manipulation of truth been going on for several centuries, and that maybe that war could have been avoided too. You know, but there was a lot of money to be had. I think about the Iraq War, when they went in and took down Saddam's statue and started the hunt for Saddam and went on and on about non-existent weapons of mass destruction, and how the first thing they hit was the Museum of Antiquities, and that all the antiquities got stolen. Wow. A lot of money in that. All of a sudden, it's not just about oil. It's also about the profit made off of antiquities dealers. Don't forget, of course, all the arms dealers, because where do you think all those weapons came from that everybody was destroying and using and ruining and buying new ones? On both sides of the war. Yeah. So I think if we drilled down hard on each incidence of violence between the West and, in the West, where we are disciplined enough not to have skirmishes just because we've got some barbarian in the woods, and now they're trying to make the citizens in the West buy up all guns and just take it out on each other, to riot in the streets and destroy all of their local shopkeepers, who will then probably not get enough insurance to reopen. Very often, not all of them will reopen, and in time you can destroy a town to where all it's got left is the big box stores on the outskirts of town. And just imagine trying to riot and loot a big box store, okay? You can't smash your way into those things very well. And most of the crap that's in there is so cheap and they're so well insured, they really wouldn't care that much anyway. So, pacifist, if you're truly committed to pacifism, you do find other ways, you find other answers, you find other solutions. So it's especially egregious for me as a pacifist to be born on a day when we honor war. I know, we honor the soldiers. We honor the people who volunteered to put their lives on the line to protect us from nothing. I can't say Hitler was nothing, and my parents were certainly deeply involved and deeply suffering, and they needed that. But there hasn't been a righteous war since. It's been nothing. Your son or daughter or you signs up for the army. You're not doing it because you like to kill or because you like guns. It's happening because the army is making incentives like, oh, we'll pay for your college, you'll get a career afterwards. And what's the army doing with you? Well, if you're lucky, you'll just go to boot camp and then you'll work in the, you'll work in the Peace Corps for a while, or I don't know. I mean, you'll do a tour of duty, but it'll be fine. You'll just stand around with a blue hat on and a gun in your hands, giving out candy to children. And yet, the highway of heroes, we've got all these people coming back dead. And that's another thing. When we put so much honor onto the soldier in the war, we are continuing to promote the militarization of our society. When we go on and on and on about how amazing these heroes are, instead of recognizing that they're mercenaries, that they're paid thugs to somebody else, they're paid thugs. And we're turning our perfectly sweet and wonderful young adults into paid thugs for the capitalist agenda. When you stop and think about it that way, then you start to recognize that all this soldier heroism propaganda is exactly that. It's propaganda designed to keep you thinking that it's necessary to have a standing army. And it is not necessary to have a standing army. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if somebody puts troops on our border, we can muster an army very quickly and probably without drafting anybody. It's not necessary to muster an army to go fight somebody in the Middle East. I mean, there was a time when we all believed that you could go in there, you could knock a few heads around, and everybody'd sit up straight and play nice. But it doesn't happen. It isn't happening. It doesn't work. And we're not going into every single backwater country where people are being mean to each other and knocking their heads and making them sit up and play nice, because you can't. You could depose a ruler and another jerk rises up in his place. You can go in with your armies and you can exterminate an entire people, genocide. And somehow, because they still have all the influences that created that situation, they still went back into civil war 10 years later. War doesn't work. Armies don't work. Military doesn't work. You can talk about the DARPA and how it's promoted auto driving and all this other stuff, but it wasn't DARPA that did the auto drive, that invented the auto drive. It was people who were incentivized by a prize. And before armies had all that money, it was some millionaire would put up $1 million and say, hey, $1 million to the person who wins the robot car race, $1 million to the person who manages to sail around the world, fly around the world on a balloon. They used to do that, and they can still do that, and we don't need an army to do that. You know, that the telephone system was installed by a few investors who strung copper wire back and forth across the nation from home to home, from every home and every town and every city, across the entire land, to where filmmakers have trouble finding stretches of landscape that they can shoot period films in where you don't accidentally spot the telephone pole. Seriously. That was done without the army. There was no militia to do that. That was done by private interest. And it is why we need to allow people to get rich, aside from the incentive of being able to get rich, because rich people invest in stuff like that. They invest in infrastructure. It's possible, too, that a wealthy community, and now I don't mean wealthy in the sense of we're all la-di-da, we're so better than you. I mean wealthy in the sense of everybody's healthy, everybody's working, we're generating surplus. Now we reinvest it back into ourselves as a community, and you know, we all get together and say, you know, if each of us gives $10, we can afford a solar system, or $20 or $100, or, you know, the way that they do hospital home lotteries, for instance. Those tickets are $100 a piece, and they're not being bought by people who are already living in $1 million homes. They're being bought by people who hope to live in $1 million home. And with them, they're able to do some pretty amazing things. So you don't need an army for that. Unless someone's actually at your borders with troops, you don't need a standing army. You've got time enough to train people. I like the way Switzerland does it, where everybody goes to boot camp, unless I suppose there's a medical reason why they shouldn't. They all go to boot camp, and they put in a couple of years in the Peace Corps, which includes boot camp, which includes weapons training and everything, and then sans weapons, out they go. I'm not sure if that's how Switzerland works. I don't know the details. I just know that for a long time, every citizen in Switzerland was required to serve 2 years in the Swiss Army, thus ensuring that they all knew what to do if they had to pick up a gun and defend their borders. And it's one of the reasons they were able to remain neutral all this time. And of course, the capitalists really like having a neutral country where they can store their wealth just in case, you know, one of their buddies takes aims at them. Because that's the thing. Armies are not directed by governments. Armies are directed by personal interests. And, you know, Mr. Rothschild might decide to take out Mr. Gates, and he would do that through taking out Mr. Gates's interests in a particular country. Now, in this case, Mr. Gates is backed by a very large country. So, I think they probably have an understanding of wealth. Details. Don't give me details. I don't care. My point is general, not detailed. We don't need war. We don't need armies. We don't need soldiers. And all of this eulogizing of soldiers, it's just scratching open the wound for people who've lost their loved ones, and it's a promotion of war. It really is. So I can honestly say I severely resent that my birthday and Remembrance Day come on the same day. And it's kind of ironic. I have a really hard time remembering other people, but nobody ever forgets me. Remembrance Day? I don't know. I can't change it. I will forever have my happy birthday day at the same time that everybody's talking about grief and solemnity and sorrow and loss and war and death, and trying to get fresh young meat to feed as cannon fodder into the dogs of war. And there's just, it's a real bummer to have your birthday. I think it'd be better to have your birthday on Christmas. You get half as many presents, but then I did anyway, because once your birthday, in my family, any birthday within 3 months of Christmas is, you know, we'll get you one big present instead of 2 little ones, kind of thing. Yeah, because it's easier that way, I guess. And so, you know, as a kid, I really didn't get that many more presents than, like, as compared with a kid whose birthday's in July or June. I don't know. It's just, the whole thing is so tiresome, you know. Last year, I survived something that should have killed me, and I really, really didn't want to have another empty day of nobody gives a damn. So, I told a few people, and you know, if we could just get 3 people here to sing at me over a cake, I'd be happy. And we did that, and we actually had 4 people singing at me over a cake, and it was every bit as wonderful as I'd imagined it to be, because I hadn't had anyone sing at me since I was a kid. And, you know, and going to a restaurant and having the waiters sing at me is something that's kind of on my bucket list, but at the same time, there just aren't a whole lot of restaurants I like, and I'm not sure that if I found one I liked, that would be one where they would stand around and sing happy birthday at me. I think you got to go to one of those chain restaurants where the employees are forced to embarrass themselves. So, one day, yeah, someday maybe when I turn 100, eh? Get a whole bunch of people to make a big deal about me somewhere public, and everybody will act like I'm queen for a day, and that'd be really sweet. So, happy birthday to me. Dan's birthday comes a week before mine, so I get an opportunity to set myself up to where he feels that he should, you know, acknowledge my birthday in some fashion, because I go to the store and I get him some nice stuff, and I even bought him a present. So, and he's got the day off work, and I don't know. I'm going to take myself off to the mall. There's a cotton candy shop that opens up once a month, and I'm going to get myself some cotton candy. And I thought I could buy cotton candy sugar, but I'm still not sure I can't. He said, well, you know, we could probably sell you a box of it. We can't sell you little bits. But I'm thinking if I show up with a bunch of snack bags and, you know, how about a couple ounces in each bag for $5 a bag? Can you do that? They just might. I mean, if it's the same amount that they would put into one of those big balls, they can easily price it, right? And I'm also going to buy some of the big balls, so I have some pre-made that I don't have to make it myself. But what's the point of having a cotton candy machine if you can't find any cotton candy sugar? I've tried the alternatives. Well, white sugar is not worth doing. It's gross, flavorless. Candy does, you know, once sugar's been melted down and made into candy, it doesn't come out like cotton candy floss. It really doesn't. So, yeah, candy is not a good substitute for cotton candy sugar. And I'm down to my last batch of cotton candy sugar from the Target clear out, where I bought all the cotton candy they had in the store. It's lasted me a couple of years. I don't make cotton candy very often, but I sure love it when I do. It's, you know, for the amount of sugar you might put in a cup of coffee at a restaurant, I get what seems like a whole day's worth of treat. And so I don't have to eat much candy to get that candy addiction satisfaction. So I'm going to go, they're open as of now. I'm going to wash the dishes first, and then I got to get changed, and then I'm going to go. And I have to drive carefully, but it's not very far away. With any luck, when I get out of the neighborhood, all the other people driving on the roads have melted down the snow, and there will be traction, because it's kind of ugly out. But I do have my winter tires. You know, and I've been promised that I've been sentenced to 108 years of life, and I'm not going to get out of that sentence, not for nothing. So even if I was to drive carelessly, I wouldn't get killed. I would just hurt my poor car. And you know, love of my car makes me drive carefully. And also pride in my good driving record. I'm very proud of my driving record. It helps that you don't drive very often. I drive about once a week. I imagine if I drove every day for work as a commuter, it might be different. But then I wouldn't. I would ride my bike. Because when I have had things to do where the only reason I'm going is to transport my body, I generally take my bike. And I suppose it might make sense to use my bike today, but I'll think about it. I might. I was thinking I might, after the cotton candy, drive across town and get some dog food, because we're all out of the premix dog food that my husband likes to feed them in the morning, the premix raw. I was thinking of going there, but at the same time, bank accounts kind of at a point where I like to leave it alone so that it covers all of the automatic bills and stuff, and so that if something comes up, we're not broke. And I don't know, maybe Dan's supposed to pick up a check at work today, but I don't know if he'll actually make it out or what he'll do, so doesn't matter. I mostly just wanted to talk about pacifism and being born on Remembrance Day. It's something I don't tell people, because there's a very good possibility that you're going to get scolded. And I always knew that someone was going to turn around and tell me I was ungrateful and I was selfish and I was self-centered. And you know, that adds to the guilt of feeling bad about having to have your birthday on a death day. So I've actually always kept it to myself. And it's really nice to be able to tell a camera, where the only way people can come back and give me negative feedback is in comments that I can delete, and I don't have to answer to it, and I don't have to sit there and listen to it as they go on about it. So, there you go. I'm 54 years old. My birthday is a death day. Happy birthday to me. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye.